Hey guys, it's Melvin Chan here from Melvin Chan Art, and you're listening to the Halftone Effect.
Welcome to another adventure of the Halftone Effect.
Save us!
Hey guys, and welcome back to the Halftone Effect. Tonight I am joined by a very special guest, Melvin Chan. Melvin, thank you for coming on the show.
Hey, no worries, man. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you on and talk about your art and your work in the industry. They're trying times at the moment, but they're showing our test to the world of art. How have you found it through these times?
Yeah, it's definitely been rough, especially because I started going to the convention scene a couple years ago. So I feel like I've only just started going into it, and it felt like a very prosperous career path, right, for artists. And I'm like, oh, this is awesome. Like, I don't have to follow like any client rules. It's just like all my stuff, and conventions will be around, and like it's like only uphill from here, right? And then bang, like this pandemic hits, and we're like, oh, I'm back at home.
Yeah, it's funny because we were talking to start, and you and me were both at Supernova in Melbourne back in March, and we just come out of the fires, and we're on the cusp of going into COVID. I mean, it's surreal. It's very surreal. Did you end up going up to Brisbane Supernova?
End of last year.
Sorry, just after. Sorry, Queens, Gold Coast. Yeah, okay,
Oh,
where's that?
Gold Coast. Yeah, yeah.
Gold
I
Coast,
was
yeah.
at Gold Coast. Yeah.
How was that? Because that was practically
That
where the
was. Yeah, yeah. We started getting news of like COVID being like a big deal, and everyone's got to be careful and stuff. And I think everyone was very wary of it because attendance was very down. That show, I've done that show 3 times now, so that was the third time. But the first 2 times I did really well. So, and it's usually one of my better shows, surprisingly. So, yeah, when I went there that third time, it was just very quiet. Yeah, you can definitely tell that people were on edge about going to a place, crowded events and stuff
crowd,
like
yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah, it's gonna be a while before we're back to the new normal, as I like to call it. But it's definitely interesting watching it all transpire and how the likes of conventions that we normally go to have just been cancelled because for the unseeable future until things get back on their feet. Now, saying that, they're adapting. They're doing digital conventions and virtual conventions, I should call them, not digital. But I guess it's another form of getting the people who would usually go to them and have their artwork there to try and get the stuff out there, which is great. How have you utilized the time?
I haven't actually done any of those virtual things. I haven't really bothered applying for it. I think it's a very good it's a very nice like gesture and thing to do, especially for like us artists who are like struggling to get exposure and stuff. But I guess I've just taken like I feel like it's like incomparable to be like face to face, right? Like in person and having your stuff, right in front of people as they walk by. So I feel like just not having that is just it's just not as good. So I just decided to take this time just to like step back, like work on my own projects, improve my skills, and yeah, just take my time doing that, and hopefully make new products and stuff, so that by the time we eventually can go back to conventions, I can come back with new things to show people.
That's it, man. That's the best response to come back with because I think that's just as important. Is to keep working in the background amongst all this, and then when we do come back to that new normal, you can bounce back even stronger. I follow you on social media. Obviously we met through mutual friends at conventions and whatnot, and we've had a few good nights out drinking and frolicking when we've been out at conventions, which has been fun. But I mean, like your artwork over the last few months, you definitely have been working hard, and that in itself is great to see that there is still a community out there still striving to try and build up their portfolio.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, like the pandemic is very like depressing and stuff, right? In a way, but I feel like it's a thing that we personally can't have no control over. And so like the best way to deal with these things is to just, deal with things that you can control, and that just comes down to, honing my skills and just doing more art.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
it's a good attitude to have, and the proof will be in the pudding once we do go back to doing conventions again. You'll have all this beautiful, gorgeous artwork to have on your walls, and your booth, man. Like, damn, they stand out when you do your setup. Like, just the
Thanks, man.
colors, they burst out onto the pathway. Like, you can't not see it. So yeah, I'm excited to see where you go to when we get back to it, and how
Yeah,
it all
cheers, man.
transpires.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, let's wind the clock back a little bit for you. How did this all start? Because did you do any study? Were you always wanted to do the arts side of stuff, or?
I basically decided to become an artist after I left uni, which was when I was 21, 22. And pretty much the main reason I did that was because I went into uni doing a game design course, and I use that title very loosely because it was a very poorly designed course. And basically, I went through it and learned nothing about game design or like the games industry or any of the process about making games at all. And I was also wasn't the best student either. Like I was a bit of a bludger and everything. So that combination, you come out as a useless person, and you got a degree of saying that you did this course, but you don't have any real tangible skill, and like that's everything in like the creative field, right? Especially with like the games industry and stuff. And so when uni finished, and then we had a supposed to find a job, I just like freaked out, and I was like, oh shit, like gotta make something of myself. And um I was like, oh, what's the thing I can learn? Like, I felt like programming was like too hard for me, and I was just not interested in it. So I was like, oh, what can I learn to get into games? Into a game studio and get a job there. And I heard that they like artists, so I was like, oh, I'll just try to be an artist. And then that's the main reason why I started practicing. But then eventually, over time, I felt like I just enjoyed the process of making art and illustration rather than purely for games. So it kind of just led me into that path, and I've just been doing art like that ever since.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, it's always funny because, like, you go and study a degree, and sometimes I know a lot of people have gone out and done a degree, and they just haven't really gelled to it. So they've kind of followed in that same demographic, but they've kind of done their own journey, which is interesting to hear you say that because, yeah, gaming, I know I've got a few friends who've done that also, and it's very different to, I guess, the world of digital art. I know you are using similar applications to create certain things, but like you're saying, there's programming involved. It's its own beast in itself.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Did you have a hard time transitioning from one to the other?
Uh, no, it wasn't too bad. I think because when I decided to do that, I knew absolutely nothing about art, so I went all the way back to the fundamentals. So in that sense, it's very similar, just like trying to do like academic drawing and exercises. How to draw a sphere and a cube. Just really rudimentary kind of drawing and painting, and I just built up from there. And then I just went through different spurs of inspiration, like oh, maybe I want to draw like anime or like make some anime style games. So I started trying to draw anime, and then I was like, oh, I want to go realistic, and then draw that, and then I want to do like whimsical fantasy, and so I do that. And so it was just basically going through cycles of that. And in the end, I found that I wasn't really interested in getting into like a game studio particularly. It was more just I wanted to make like a certain kind of picture. Um, yeah. So that's just what and yeah.
It's funny because like to go back to the start and really keep building up and testing the grounds for you, like you're saying, you're doing realism, you're doing manga, anime style illustrations, but where you've landed is really, I guess, not mid ground, but it's completely different to what you were practicing. But those skills that you were learning were the building blocks of where you've gone to now, which is important.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
And then I mean, like anyone that's aspiring to be an artist, you have to have the basics before you can break it all. and
Yeah,
start it as your own style.
yeah, definitely, yeah.
But yeah, I think that's great, man. It's very interesting to hear you say that. Yeah, it's especially the fact that you studied some one um, pathway that led you onto another. Yeah, and it's quite often you hear creators and illustrators, writers, they might started out as a journalist or a game designer, and they've gone down a completely different path,
Yeah.
which is awesome. It's cool to hear that because I guess at the same time you've always like you've gone and studied that, but you've got that to fall back on if you ever wanted to go back.
I guess so. And like I saw, like, yeah, I still feel like even like any level of illustration and art, you can still, yeah, you can translate it back into that field. So it's always a handy thing. And I still do that, on the side as well with like freelance gigs and stuff. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's really interesting to hear you say that. So that was your first steps. When you were growing up as a child, did you have a lot of influences around you? What did you admire and aspire to when you were younger?
Well, definitely video games was like the biggest part of my childhood. I was never encouraged by like anyone to go into this field because I guess I didn't really come from an artistic family, or they didn't know anyone who like made any career from doing something like this. Um, I didn't really have any friends that did this sort of stuff. Um, and like coming from like it was a very stereotypical Asian household in the way that you might hear a lot of how the parents want their kids. It's that kind of the immigrant dream where they come from overseas to like a Western country and then they have a kid there, and it's really like admirable, right? The parents give up their whole lives so that, you have the opportunity to do whatever you want and, get the best education and everything. And, they're like, okay, you should, go study hard and get the best education you can and become, a doctor or a lawyer or whatever, a high paying job. And so I was always encouraged to do something like that. And in school and stuff, I did fairly well in all that sort of stuff. Like um, I was quite adept at like mathematics and stuff, and I actually did legitimately enjoy doing that subject and that kind of thing. But yeah, I was never encouraged to do art and stuff, and so I think that's why it took me. I mean, that's why it took me so long to actually get into it. It was just after uni that I actually got into art. Um, so as useless as that course was, it kind of made me, give art a go, and it just sparked and made me realize that it is something I really enjoy doing. And so, as bad as it was, at the very least, it showed me, something that I love doing, and which I might not have otherwise ever found.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of looking at it, man. You also have to realize, like, I know it's sad because I think the arts world is kind of it's not looked down upon, but it's not seen as a real career in the eye set of a
Yeah, it's a bit of a stigma.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah,
Which is, it's funny because you look at what we're sitting on right now and how everything's gone, and people are hungry for entertainment. And I mean, that comes in the form of art, comics, video games, TV shows, movies. I mean, it really puts it in perspective when you work in the industry and you see how people are consuming entertainment. And it's like, well,
yeah,
there's a
exactly.
price on this, guys. Like it is it is what it is at the end of the day because people have to make money from this, and I think it's dismissed very easily. And unfortunately, well, fortunately for us, hopefully that'll change. That stigma will change coming out the other side of this because it's important that people realize that it's not just a matter of going and drawing a picture, a good looking picture. There's thought that goes behind the process of how someone creates it. Like you're saying, the characters that you create in your mythology, there's thought process behind that, and in your posts, especially on what you do on social media, you put a lot of depth into it and explain the character, which I always love seeing that because there's a story behind each illustration.
Yeah, yeah. It's definitely a fun part of it. So
Yes,
kind
yeah.
of,
Well,
yeah.
no, I mean that's the part. That's the joy of creating.
Exactly, and I think that's why people think that it shouldn't. It's not a real job because there's like a level of fun in there, and then there's just a certain kind of people that say, how can it be a job if you're just having fun drawing pictures all day and making up stories and stuff.
Well, they need a reality check because I think that,
For sure.
man, like, yeah, but there's double sided blade with that because you are running a business. Again, at conventions, you're hustling the punters that go to it, and you're making money. So there you go. There's a bit of math in there. You know, it's it's a career. It's a business, and anyone that dismisses that is not actually aware of what goes into it in the background, especially because the amount of effort we put into getting ourselves to conventions, multiple conventions, might I add, it's a lot of effort, tiring effort. And you've done overseas conventions as well, so I mean, you're fortunate to be able to get over there before this happened and see what it was like outside of Australia.
Yeah, yeah.
And how was that experience compared to the Australian conventions?
Um, it was very different in the sense. I feel like I've talked to a lot of the attendees there, like the other artists and stuff, and they have like their quiet shows that are kind of sound like the same level as us, or like really small mini cons in like outer suburbs and all that sort of thing. But it's just the difference is they have the potential of having far larger conventions. So there's a few throughout the year that are just absolutely obscene in scale in terms of like size of the venue and the numbers of attendance like we can only dream of. Um, so in that sense, it's really crazy. And so I've only done one overseas in America, and so I deliberately picked one that was known as one of the biggest board game ones, which also had a big emphasis on the fantasy art genre for artists and stuff. And so obviously that fits what I do. So that's why I chose that one. And yeah, it did really well. And especially for like someone that, had never been there and like no one had ever heard of me and stuff, because, there's that thing, you attend cons regularly and you kind of can do better once you have like returning customers and like fans that,
Yes.
want to see your stuff and, want to see the next issue or the next painting, the next book or whatever. But yeah, even without that, it was just that, yeah, the sheer numbers was something else. And yeah, and the enthusiasm at that con was really good. It was really the audience was essentially very tailored to my style. So I did really well at that one, and that was Gen Con. Yeah,
Oh, awesome, man! That's good to hear. And it is. It's a different. It's a ever changing format. The convention circuit, and you like you've how long have you been doing it for now? Was it 3 to 4 years?
yeah, it's something like that. I'll say four. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was around we probably would have started around the same time. And when you talk about before, when you're saying about building up those convention rounds and doing, multiple conventions multiple times, you're 100% right in saying that because you do need that fundamental audience to come back and buy those things, and it transitions into sales. It transitions into people checking out your artwork online, whether it be social media or crowdfunding, Patreon, whatever it may be, and that is a key fundamental. Now, obviously, I've monitored your booth before, and you seem to have that really good connection with the audience, and you're talking to them. How do you find that interaction? Do you think that's important in gaining those people to come back and purchase from you, or even just interact with you in general?
yeah. I think it's everything. It's just part of like I don't want to like talk like it's purely methodical, but I guess it's part of like the sales tactic in a way if you want to talk it in that sense. But like I don't treat it like okay, I'm here to make a sale. I want to swindle this guy into buying my stuff. It's more just I want to share my stuff and explain it to like this person who's never seen my stuff before comes up to my table for 30 seconds to a minute, and I want to explain as quickly and as best I can, what I have here and like what I'm sharing, because essentially I think it helps a lot that it's like all purely personal, and so like I'm literally just putting myself on the table for everyone to see and judge me and stuff. And so I really do want to show the best version of myself in my work. And so that kind of gives me the motivation to really, explain it and stuff. And I genuinely enjoy explaining it because it's my own characters and stories. And so I think that enthusiasm comes through as well. And when when you talk to someone who's enthusiastic about something, you enjoy listening to them more. Like, oh, they're more fun to talk to. So that's kind of just the vibe that I want. And if people enjoy talking to you and the experience of hearing about your work, your process, your stories, then they're more willing to be invested in it. And so yeah, that's kind of the part of how you try to get people into what you have to offer.
Absolutely, man. It is about the interaction. It's important to interact with the audience, and even if it is a simple hello, but if they're coming over to check your artwork out and it's purely just to have a conversation with you, that might be embedded in their mind, and they'll come back and source you out next time and spend some money on some artwork, and that is just as important as the hundreds of sales you'll make at a convention for a weekend.
Yeah.
It really does make a difference, and it brings a bit of spark to people's lives as well. I think that's important. I think that's very important. There are people, they're going around checking out all this artwork, and they get to see something that inspires them and that brings a smile to their face. That's just as cool. Like, I've had that, and it brings a smile to your face as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's a big part of why I do all this stuff. Like I never experienced that feeling. You post something online and then you get like, it's like 50 likes and people are like, cool, nice work. And like that's kind of the extent of it. You get like 5 comments, and I was like, does anyone? And then you post another thing, you get like less likes and less comments, and then you're thinking, oh, like, is my work getting worse? Do people actually like this stuff? But then when you go to these conventions in person and you actually see people's genuine reactions to your thing, and the fact that they spend like their real hard-earned money on your work, that shows like another level of appreciation for what you've done. And it's just like a incomparable feeling, really.
Yeah, I mean, social media is a very it's very there and gone. It's a quick grab. It's a split second of people's attention, and it is great when you get heaps of likes and comments on your posts. Like we can't do what one of our friends does in the ratio of likes in his posts.
Yep.
But I mean, it's a rewarding feeling having people reach out and experience that joy that comes with your artwork. So that's important. And on that segue, it's a perfect segue into talking about social media, because what I find in the podcast, especially, it is it's a beast for a lot of our guests that come on to try and maneuver how many different platforms there are now. Like I can't keep up with how many there are. But how do you find it as being an artist and trying to continuously feed people so they can consume your work?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, I think. But the thing is, majority of the followers that I have now, they all came from conventions and stuff.
Yeah.
And so like basically I didn't actually get my followers from purely posting online. It was more actually being in their faces, face to face, like in person, to get their attention. And so like, and this is just kind of the social media is just kind of to remind those people that I still exist. I'm still making these things. Here's what I'm up to now, that kind of thing. But I think in terms of like finding, I mean, people always talk about how they like, they figured out the Instagram algorithm and all that stuff. Like I have no idea about how any of that works, and like how can you really control it. Like the way I see it, it fluctuates so much. Like I know at one point I decided, okay, I'm going to post like every day for a month and see what happens. And like there was just like odd posts, and towards the end I was like getting a lot of likes and stuff, and I was getting like more likes than I had followers per post. So it was like I was getting traction for it in that sense. But then you're like, oh, it's going up now, and you feel good, and then you post again, and then all of a sudden you've got like no likes again, and you're like, oh, what happened? And then you can like stress about it, I guess, but in the end it's like what I mentioned before, how it's like kind of like the pandemic in a way. It's something you can't really control. So I feel like I don't want to stress too hard about it. I just really, if I just have something I want to share, I just throw it online and just go about my day. Just spend like 5-10 minutes, just post it everywhere, and just go back to drawing. I try not to think about it too much.
That's a great way to be, man. And I've come to the realization in the last 8 months of the same thing. It's been you can try and tame that algorithm, and as soon as you've got it, you think you've got it down pat, it'll just throw the rug underneath you, and
It
it's
doesn't feel good when
too
you like put all that work in and then it's suddenly lost, you know? Like you put all that work to get all the extra likes and follows and then a week later it's all gone.
exactly
Yeah.
yeah. It's that split second, and it can be heartbreaking because we do put a lot of effort into our artwork, and for it to be, I guess, trying to manipulate the crowd, whether it be Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, dare I say it, TikTok. Um,
So I've
you
no
know,
idea how that works.
you're asking the
Especially
wrong
for
guy
art.
here,
I have no
because
idea, yeah.
yeah, exactly. I mean, it's juggling act, and it becomes overbearing and it becomes overwhelming. I find for some people, and for myself, I only focus on one at a time, and it helps take that pressure off, because if you're constantly feeding it, you've always got that hanging over your shoulders, and you're wearing that weight to try and put stuff out there. Um, and it actually becomes, and I've watched a couple of short docos on it, and it becomes an addiction, almost like gambling, that you become addicted to the likes and the follows, and you constantly need to have that approval and
Yeah.
that win.
It
And
definitely
it's
is like
very
gambling. Like how we said that sorry, like to cut you off, but it's like how the
no,
likes
go
are
for it.
really erratic, you know? So if like post maybe this time I'll get like the big hit and get like, 1,000 likes or whatever. Or 2,000, 3,000.
Exactly.
But then, you just, yeah. And once you get it, like nothing really happens. Like your life doesn't really improve or change in any way. But then you're straight back to looking for the next hit.
Look, I'm gonna say I'd love to get 1,000 likes on one of my posts. That'd be great. I haven't hit that yet.
That was a long time ago for me. But yeah, it was a bit of
you
a
don't
fluke. But yeah.
you don't need to boast about that. That's fine. We understand. It's alright. I'll just cry myself to sleep tonight. Never get 1,000 likes. It's funny because like our mutual friends, they're all into fan art, and some seem to smash it out of the park with their fan art, and others seem to just kind of just mediocrely get through it, which is still amazing for what they're doing. But I find that with my art especially, that the less I focus on fan art and the more I focused on my own creations, that it does tend to build a more loyal audience.
Yeah,
That
for
the
sure.
people are interested in, and watching your Instagram especially, you seem to have that happening. That you're getting, and you're speaking about it with the likes and that, and how you get a ratio of likes per post, and all it really takes is 50 to 100 people to enjoy that work that will transition into sales. And I mean, that's kind of proof in the pudding, without you know being that addictive personality of constantly posting something, and wanting likes, and wanting that notoriety that comes with it.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, like I full heartedly agree with you there. You're on the money when it comes to not overbearing yourself with social media.
Yeah, yeah. Because it can just take up too much of your time. And I'd rather just spend the time, yeah, just doing more art, trying to get better.
Yeah, and you lose focus on the goal, and that is to create and improve your skill, not improve your social media platform skills. And spending half your time with your head in your phone. Like, I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
don't.
And it's like you're not even really having fun with it. Like you rather just go watch a movie or play a game or something, at least then you can de-stress, you can actually have fun, might pick up some inspiration, that sort of thing. Just almost anything's better than like just spending too much time on social media.
Yeah, well, I mean, like people I've been talking to in this season of the podcast have also the same thing. Social media is an outlet it's an unhealthy addiction, and what I've found personally for me is that I actually turn social media off on the weekends, and it gives you kind of a breather from the world, because there's so much going on, and it
Yeah.
becomes a very overwhelming circumstances that switching it off, and that means I'm still doing my artwork on my computer, but I'm not actually on Facebook, Instagram, whatever else there is to use. But I get that kind of breather. And I think that for me has been the biggest game changer out of using these platforms to try and gain exposure.
Right. Yeah. No, that's really good. Like I've been thinking about doing that, like just turning off social media for a bit and stuff. It's more like because even when you're like looking at it, I'm like, oh, maybe I'll follow these hashtags and people for inspiration and stuff. But you get bombarded with so much work, and then you save it all for later to look at, and it's like I don't even look at it because there's so much. So I'm like not even really gaining the value that I was seeking.
Nah, nah. You might as
Yeah.
well just go onto Pinterest and use that
Yeah.
instead.
Yeah.
Because
Exactly.
you actually probably would go back and look at it and study it a little bit. But yeah, it can be very poisoning, and that balance I feel as though it really works to the benefit of just turning it off and switching off from it all. And I've got to enjoy myself on a weekend, and I have to look at social media.
It's always nice.
It is, but that's cool, man. That's good to hear that you have that boundary that you can actually stop and focus on something without using the social media and becoming addicted to it in a certain way. Um, that said, now you are very familiar with crowdfunding and with Patreon. You've had a few successful Kickstarters over the past couple of years. Do you want to give us a bit of details on that?
Yeah, I mean the Kickstarters, I just it was purely I organized the goal just to be able to, pay for the production and the shipping of the product I was selling, which was essentially just like little mini card collections of all my work. Um, and yeah, it was very successful. I deliberately chose a deck of cards as like a smaller kind of project, so it was kind of more manageable since it was like my first, my first two Kickstarters. So it was really just to get used to the process of running one and seeing what hiccups come through. And even if there was like a big blunder, at the very least, it would be a smaller cost. You know what I mean? Than say
Yes.
like
Yeah.
making a book or something. Um, but yeah, I mean, luckily they've been successful in getting funded, which is good. Um, yeah,
Yeah, I think Quick Kickstarter is it's a great way of getting your work out to a lot wider audience that you wouldn't have that. And we've spoken about this before in the podcast, but it actually allows you to up your production value and also be able to cover costs to have extra stuff printed, whether it be books, cards, prints, whatever it may be, pins for that matter as well. But it gives you that chance to get it all out there, get more in turn, but also give back to the audience, whether it be with exclusives. Now I know you do enamel pins in yours, and you've done a few other things, prints and whatnot. But it's kind of those little exclusives that give back to the community for coming to Kickstarter.
yeah, for sure. Because they're like investing in a product that doesn't exist yet, right? So
Exactly.
got to give them a little something for having some faith in you.
Yeah, I mean, there's that. There's a big risk with going to Kickstarter, and asking people to support your work before there's anything. Well, in most cases, anything tangible to really back. And I think it's important. They're just as important as the campaign itself. If you don't have the backers, then you don't have the campaign in the bag, and that can be stressful.
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean, and it also comes back to being loyal to your backers too, and making sure that you get your rewards out to them, and keep them happy, because it's the same again, man. It's like the conventions; those people that come back will come back again and again and again, to enjoy your work.
Yeah, you got to make sure they have a good experience.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And how, like, obviously there's been positives with you doing Kickstarters. How have you found the audience react to when you've come back for another Kickstarter?
Um, the second one was interesting. There was definitely a lot of returning people. But I'm not even sure how it happened. There was a lot of international orders from places I've never been. So it would have been people that I've never seen or met before. So it was some way of However, it popped up in the Kickstarter feed or something. But definitely the second time round, even though I made about the same, I feel like it was more successful in that sense that I reached, more newer people. Yeah, so I honestly don't know how that happened, but that's basically what happened.
Yeah, it can be. It's really, how do I put it? It's kind of, it's something special because when you have people that, I've had people from the Ukraine and Turkey, Israel back my Kickstarter, and it's kind of surreal because well, for first off, the comics are in a different language. English is probably not their first language, and they're picking up my comic book, and it's kind of like, it's that this is so weird. It's surreal. How is this happening? Like I usually prime to the Western civilized countries that they're the ones that are usually backing them, but yeah, it's just something else completely, man. So it's really cool to hear you say that. And it seems like it's a more of a common thing that there are a lot more other countries coming on board to Kickstarter and checking it out, which is awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
And the more people that do that, that means the more exposure that you get and the more outreach that you get your work into the world.
Yeah, exactly.
And then comes more offers for you to do conventions all around the world when we can travel again.
Yeah, that's it. That's definitely the good side of the internet and social media and stuff.
Yes, that is positive side, not
Yeah.
not the addictive side.
Yeah, exactly.
Now you're also familiar with Patreon. You have an account that you run for your subscribers. Tell us a little bit of that one.
Um, yeah, well, basically, it was just another way if people really liked my stuff, they could continue to support it as I developed it. Um, I, I haven't charged on it recently because I usually charge per creation on my specific series of animal characters. And the main thing with the Patreon is I didn't. If there's a tip for anybody, is I didn't make it like a completely separate thing where I offer new products on there, because if you do that, you easily fall in the trap of having too much to do and spending too much time on too many things. So basically, the Patreon it's just streamlined along with what I'm doing anyway. So I'm just doing all these pictures. I'm painting all these illustrations regardless, and then if people want to support it along the way, that's awesome. I really appreciate it. But if not, I'll just keep trucking along. And so that's basically all I did with it, rather than say oh, if you join this Patreon, I'll draw like new things, because then that just like doubles up the amount of work I have to do. Right, I have to do like 2 illustrations like a month or whatever. But this way, it's just to support what I'm doing anyway. And I think that's kind of the easiest way to start off doing something like that. I mean, you can go down the path, like if you can manage all that work, you can offer like a lot more exclusives and stuff. But at the very least, yeah, I've just started it based on that.
Yeah, well, that's exciting in itself, man. Because you've taken it from a different aspect. Because I find a lot of people that do Patreon, they kind of give it all for a couple of months, and they're finding themselves just basically a slave to it. Whereas it sounds like you've kind of you've given yourself that freedom to go as you please.
Yeah, for sure.
And
just like gotta be clear like what you're offering, right? And then just don't overpromise is the big thing.
yeah, I mean that's important. And if you do overcomplicate it, it can become a nightmare. And the same goes for Kickstarter as well.
Yeah, exactly.
You've got to really commit to what you're doing, and if you can't commit to that, then don't um, don't fill the glass up too much. Otherwise, you'll end up just losing control of the whole situation.
Yeah, that's it.
And I mean, the audience on that, have you seen a transition from the Kickstarter to Patreon, or is it more of the comic convention?
It's definitely more of the conventions that it usually comes from. I had the biggest it's not even too big of a Patreon, but I had the biggest spikes from fans and attendees from the US cons, basically. Um, because I think it's more that they knew that I'll like they could tell that I was from overseas, and they probably wouldn't see me at shows regularly. So I think they just decided to, contribute through Patreon as a way to, be able to see and get my stuff regularly.
Yep. Yeah, well, I mean, that's still good in itself. Like, you've still got those return sales coming through. I guess I call them sales, but you've got those return fans coming.
Yeah.
I shouldn't call them sales. That's wrong. They're not. They're people. They have feelings. But that's great to see that, man. And I mean, it's a credit to your work to be able to convey those followers and those fans over to both Kickstarter and Patreon. There are very few that can juggle both those beasts.
Yeah.
The time and effort we put into those, I just don't think people outside of that realm really understand.
Yeah. Not until you do it, yeah.
Oh, it's a huge process. Like, to get a Kickstarter up and running, you're basically working a month to iron out all the creases, make sure it looks presentable, videos, pledges, fulfilling those rewards after the Kickstarter's finished. It's a month's work, easily.
Especially as a small business when you're just one guy.
It's a one-man machine, and the thing I love about it is that your backers will always understand if you keep them in the loop, which is something I really can't say enough, is that you really need to make sure that if you're behind with what you're doing, or you haven't done an update for 2 to 3 weeks, or a week for that matter, just shoot them a line and just tell them how things are going, because they've put money behind the campaign for you. They've pledged their hard-earned cash, and you want to make sure that they know that they're going to get something at the end of the ride. So that is really important.
Yeah, agreed. It's the least you can do. Just tell them what's going on. Doesn't even have to be much. Just like, delaying the printing.
Yeah, delaying the printing. I'm losing my mind.
The proofs didn't turn out.
The proofs didn't come out properly, so I have to go back and redo half the book. It is a huge process, and it's definitely not for everyone, but it is for the ones that can actually, I guess, muster it and master the whole process, which is cool.
Definitely an option.
Melvin, this has been a great episode. I have to say, it's been great talking to you about the world of creating and talking about comics. I think I've taken enough of your time, but the joy of that will be we'll be able to get you back on for another episode of The Halftone Effect. But before we do wrap up tonight, do you want to tell the listeners where they can find your work?
You can find all of my stuff online. Just everything at Melvin Chan Art. So Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at Melvin Chan Art, ArtStation at Melvin Chan Art. My website is melvinchanart.com. If you want to send me a message, say hello or anything, just melvinchanart@gmail.com.
Awesome. There you go, guys. Go and check out Melvin's work. He is kicking ass with the work that he is putting out, and it's worth your follow, and it's also worth your money. So go and check it out. Again, Melvin, thank you for joining us on this podcast. We hope to have you back in the future.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's been absolute pleasure, mate. Guys, thanks for listening. We'll be back again next week with another issue of The Halftone Effect.
Hey Halftoners, it's Brendan from D's Comics here. You might remember me from such podcasts as The Halftone Effect, featuring Brendan from D's Comics.
No, they're all thinking I'm so wide and nerdy. Think I'm just too wide and nerdy. Think I'm just too wide and nerdy.
Well, I'm here to tell you, at D's Comics, we love comics. We really love comics. We really, really, really love comics. We're proud to be a comic shop that's all about comics and stories. Sure, we have a great range of collectibles, merchandise, and things, but the thing we love the most is sharing stories with the comic-loving community. Things are nice, of course, but it's the stories that bring us together. Pop into D's next time you're in Canberra and share some stories, or check out our website or social media by searching D's Comics Canberra. We look forward to hearing from you soon. Thanks, guys.
Think I'm just too wide and nerdy.